Hi, I'm Steven Horne, and today we're going to talk about how to maintain health in the urinary system. The urinary system obviously plays a really important role in the body because it's a major system of elimination, and it's filtering toxins out of the blood and helping to maintain fluid and mineral balance. But before we can talk about the urinary system, we need to talk about the importance of just water, period. We know that most of the earth is covered with water, and our bodies similarly are made up of about 65 to 70% 5% water by volume. However, if since water molecules are really small, if you actually counted all the molecules in your body, about 99% of them would be water molecules. So it is really water that makes life possible. And water has a very interesting property. It consists, as well we know, H2O, 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. But the way the hydrogens bond to the water, um, they bond kind of at angles sort of like Mickey Mouse ears, with the oxygen molecule being the head and the hydrogen molecules being the ears. And because the hydrogens bond on one side, that gives water polarity, means it's dipolar. It's the most dipolar substance you've got. So one side has a positive charge, the other side has a negative charge, which is why it's nearly universal solvent. It can attach pretty much to anything because it has both a positive and a negative charge on different sides. Herbs really don't work, and neither do nutrients without water. Everything that goes into the body has to be dissolved and suspended in water. And many herbal actions actually are all about moving water. In other words, if you look at like laxatives, laxatives work by causing more water to be retained in the colon. Diuretics work by causing more water to be flushed out through the kidneys. Expectorants and decongestants work by moving more water into the lung tissue to hydrate the mucus and loosen it so it can be expelled from the body. So you can't get most herbs to do their job if you don't have enough water. In fact, since herbs and supplements are basically dried little powders and capsules, if you don't take plenty of water when you drink them, you actually may not feel as good because you're not giving your body enough water for them to work with. So Dr. Batman Gila was a medical doctor who was a political prisoner in Iran. And in trying to help a fellow prisoner who was suffering with an ulcer, he basically, the only thing he could do is get him to drink water, and he actually helped him to cure the ulcer. And he found that just getting the inmates to drink more water resolved many of their health problems. So he went on to research a lot about how water can cure disease. And his work is rather controversial. There are a lot of people who disagree with it, but he has a website, watercure.com. But I think that he has some really, really valid points. I think that a lot of our health problems stem from dehydration. So you think of it, healthy cells are like grapes. Grapes are plump and juicy and they're full of water. And as you take the moisture out of the grapes, you make raisins. And raisins are all shriveled up and so forth because most of the moisture is gone. In fact, I just harvested a bunch of grapes from my grapevine and made a bunch of raisins. So I actually watched this process as that went through my food dehydrator. But if you look at what happens to us, it looks like we're pretty much dehydrating as we age. In other words, we start off life being plump and juicy, and then we end up, being shriveled and wrinkled like a raisin or a prune. So I think it makes sense to think that part of the reason why this is happening is we're just simply dehydrating. We're simply not getting the water into our cells that our cells need in order to be healthy. Dr. Batman Gila found out that thirst is not an adequate indicator of dehydration for a couple of reasons. One is that many people, and especially as they grow older, confuse thirst with hunger. So when they feel like they need something, they often will eat something instead of drinking. And the other problem is that most people don't actually drink water. They drink all kinds of other beverages which are not as hydrating, and in fact, in many cases, those beverages are actually dehydrating. Caffeinated beverages. Caffeine is a bit of a diuretic, and it also tends to kill thirst. I've noticed that myself when I take caffeinated beverages. I'm not as thirsty. Alcohol interferes with the antidiuretic hormone in the pituitary gland and causes you to lose a lot of water. And the main effects of a hangover are actually due to dehydration. Artificially sweetened drinks also have adverse effects on how our body processes water. And another part of the problem is that when we dehydrate, 66% of the water we lose as we dehydrate comes from inside the cells, only 26% from the extracellular fluids or the lymph, and only 8% from the blood, because the body's got to keep the blood hydrated, so it pulls water out of the lymph and out of the cells before it pulls water out of the blood. But thirst is regulated by the level of water in the blood. So we can lose a lot of water from our cells and not notice that we're not drinking enough to replace all the water at the same time, because we're just drinking enough water to replace what's in our blood, but not enough to rehydrate our cells properly. So again, these other beverages cannot replace water. I mean, the diuretic effect of caffeine gets lost if you use it regularly, but it's still, doesn't substitute for drinking water. In fact, beverages in general don't substitute for drinking water because you need pure water in order to be able to have it latch onto things so your body can use it to get stuff that you don't need out of the body, especially through the kidneys. And sugary beverages, including fruit juice, raise blood sugar, which actually increases thirst and urination. And milk is really a food. It's not, it shouldn't even be considered a beverage. So how do you tell if you're dehydrated? Well, I've studied outdoor survival, and a couple of the outdoor survival experts, talk about that dehydration is one of the first things that will kill you. Hypothermia, which is basically exposure to excess heat or excess cold, is your number one concern in a survival situation, and that's followed rapidly by dehydration. And so what they say is that you don't go by thirst for telling whether you're hydrated. You go by the color of your urine. Basically, your urine should be fairly light colored, and if it's dark, you're not drinking enough water. And that the only exception to that is if you're taking certain B vitamins, they do color your urine a bright yellow. So that doesn't work exactly, but that's, a really good indicator of whether you've got enough water or not, because the body's having to concentrate toxins because you're not drinking enough. Feeling tired and feeling fuzzy in the head is actually a really good indication of dehydration, because a 2% drop in water in your brain results in fuzzy thinking. Also, if you get headaches frequently, a lot of people find that if they start drinking more water, their headaches start going away. Indigestion, it takes a lot of water to digest food. And so you need to have a lot of water, not with meals, but prior to meals, in order to be able to create the digestive secretions to put out on the food so that the food can be digested properly, the nutrients absorbed. And then once that has happened and the material goes into the colon, the body wants to recycle as much of that water as it can. So if you are somewhat dehydrated, it'll keep pulling the water out of that stool until your stool becomes dry and hard and you become constipated. So constipation is another major indication of dehydration, especially if you have really hard stools that are difficult to pass. Also, if you have problems with congestion or respiratory allergies, that can be a big indication that you're dehydrated. I was having a lot of problems with getting allergic reactions to dust in my garden, and when I read that, I actually started drinking lots of water and taking a little bit of natural salt with it, and basically it stopped me from having the allergic reactions in the garden. So water is really important. So what Dr. Pat Mangula recommends is that you drink at least half an ounce of water per pound of body weight per day. Um, and again, I don't know how to convert that into metrics, but basically what that means is, 150-pound person needs about 75 ounces of water per day, as well as eliminating or reducing diuretic beverages. And you also need a little bit of natural salt to go with that. Salt is basically natural salt, which is always colored. If the salt is white, it's been bleached and it's not completely natural. But if you get a natural salt, it'll have a little bit of color to it, a little bit of gray or sometimes pink or red or other colors. It's basically dehydrated ocean water, and your blood is basically ocean water. It's salt with a little bit of minerals and water, and so having a little bit of natural salt actually helps to hydrate you better. And salt is not a problem for your blood pressure. It's dehydration that's the problem. So telling people to avoid salt because of their blood pressure, they were actually, what would be better is if they drank more water, it would dilute the salt in their bloodstream more, and then their blood pressure would come down. So having discussed this importance of water, let's turn our attention to the urinary system, which is the major fluid regulating system in the body. And we have our two kidneys, which sit in the small of the back and are fed with major veins and arteries. The aorta, actually coming off the heart, comes into the kidneys, and the vena cava, going back to the heart, comes out of the kidneys. The kidneys produce the urine, put it into the urethra, which are tubes that go down to the bladder, which hold the urine until the urethra, which is the passage that the urine comes out of. There's a little sphincter muscle at the bottom of the bladder that releases so you can urinate and get rid of that excess fluid. So the kidneys, though, don't just filter stuff out of the body. That's one of the things they do. They actually try to maintain a balance between water and mineral levels so that if there's too much calcium in the blood or whatever, they dump it out in the urine. So it's trying to make sure that your mineral balance is correct. The kidneys also play a role in regulating blood pressure. So if your kidneys are having problems, sometimes that alone can cause your blood pressure to go up. They help to regulate the pH of the body. One of the major byproducts of metabolism is acid, because your body takes electrons out of food for electron transport to have energy to do things, and the result is hydrogen missing an electron, which is acid, protons. And the kidneys are charged with the responsibility of taking those protons out of the bloodstream, that acid, and getting rid of it. And they cannot do that job efficiently if you do not drink enough water. The kidneys are also involved in producing vitamin D, in helping to produce red blood cells, and produce hormones, which is how they're involved in regulating blood pressure and fluid and mineral balance. There's also emotional issues with the urinary system. It's linked with fear in both Oriental and Western tradition, which may be because the adrenals sit on top of the kidneys and are, of course, the glands that respond to us feeling like we're under stress. And since they're on top of the kidneys, they seem to affect the kidneys. And it appears that chronic fear can contribute to problems like bedwetting in children, frequent urinary tract infections, and other urinary tract issues, as well as unresolved anger can also affect the urinary system, causing water retention and bladder irritation. So there's only a few questions on the lifestyle analysis for the urinary system, but they're very, very important. One is, energy, because in filtering out the acid waste, they help maintain the alkaline state of the body, which is where you have energy. As the body becomes increasingly acidic, you become more and more tired. body odor or bad breath, which relates to filtering toxins out of the body, problems with the monthly cycle, because the urogenital tract is somewhat interlinked, dark circles under the eyes. Dark circles under the eyes are generally kidney adrenal issues, either food allergies or sometimes the lack of kidney function. Also, bags under the eyes. If you kind of have that baggy, saggy stuff under the eyes, that can also be related to the kidneys. Skin problems. The skin is like the third kidney. So if the kidneys are not able to filter things out of the blood efficiently, they may go out through the skin. Of course, urinary concerns. And then dry, damaged, dull hair. That has to do with the mineral regulation of the kidneys. So a little bit of assessing the terrain of the kidneys. We say that the kidneys are hot or irritated when urination is burning, painful, or scalding. Cold, the urination is scanty or it's difficult to urinate. Damp is water retention, retaining fluid in your tissues. And dry is joint and back pain, stiffness, and your pH becoming over acid. The key system product for the urinary system is juniper and parsley. Juniper is a diuretic. Parsley is also a mild diuretic that's rich in sodium and potassium, which are necessary electrolytes for maintaining fluid and mineral balance in the body. Also has uva ursi, which contains a compound that acts as a urinary antiseptic, dandelion root, and chamomile flower. This formula is designed to help stimulate the kidneys to remove excess water. It's primarily for cold and damp conditions of the urinary system. It's not necessarily the best one if for the hot conditions of the urinary system, especially if you have inflammation in the kidneys. Juniper is not a good herb to use when the kidneys themselves are inflamed. The bladder irritation is less of a problem with juniper berries. What would be the better formula for the irritation would be the cranberry and buchu formula, which is another urinary formula available. Cranberry is cooling, and it also helps to make it so that bacteria can't stick to the lining of the bladder, which means it helps to prevent urinary tract infections. So there you have a little bit about the importance of drinking water and some of the things that we can do to promote a healthy urinary tract. So make good use of this information for your own health, especially remembering to drink that water, and also be sure to share it with other people so that they can also improve their health.